Good morning. It's Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Boy, we got a couple of perspectives for you today. We have a very interesting guest who's going to tell us all about digital photography and maybe that old-fashioned film photography. Who knows? We're going to start with a kudo. So I think I'm going to turn the kudo desk over to my sidekick and the major domo of this program, Mrs. Busby. Go ahead, Judith Kay.
Well, last night, Bill and I are just a little sleepy today because we had a late night last night.
We were in your town.
Huh?
We were in Max town last night.
We were down in the big city of Springfield at the airport to see the final flight of Honor Flight come in last night. And
final for this year.
For this year, yeah. It'll kick up again come 2014. But gosh, that was my first trip down there. And is that ever something that gets your attention? When these vets come that have been in, well, there were Second World War people, there were Korean War people, there were Vietnam people.
No, believe it, not yet. Not yet. We haven't.
I thought I saw some.
No, not till we have to go through the Korean. See, the reason we have the Koreans is we old timers, we're getting out of here quite a few every day. And so
that's why they call us the checkout generation.
The checkout generation, right? But so that's why we've been to take the Korean veterans, which is a really neat thing. And we've reached a stage now in the Honor Flight program where there are a lot more Korean veterans going on these trips than World War II veterans. And when we get down through work our way through the ranks of the Korean veterans, then hopefully, boy, do I hope that there's enough money around to start bringing these Vietnam boys there. And girls.
Anyway, there were people there who had been on the flight that day and were from Lincoln, and that was kind of fun. They're Mount Pulaski people, so there were area people that we saw, and it's very moving. I suggest that when you hear that they're going to start the flights up for 2014, that you might consider going down to the airport to welcome them. It's a really nice thing, and I'd like
feel good thing, isn't it?
Darn good feel good. I have an important announcement from the Logan Mason Menard Regional Office.
Well, wait a minute. Should we play the trumpets and get their attention?
I think so, because this is announcing yet more change in our lives, of course. But if you want to have a better shot at participating in the job market and didn't see fit to finish high school, the GED test is changing considerably. And the last GED test that will be given as we've known it will be November 12th, and it will change then. So the deal is that they want to remind everyone of the deadline. GED test takers have to act now to finish and pass before the current test expires. Support is available at the county offices of regional superintendent, the three counties that are together, our Logan,
we probably
Mason,
should tell
and
them
Menard.
where that is. If it isn't in there,
It's in the old John Logan building, right on McLean Street, right down from the pink shutter.
Right across from the library.
Across from the library, you betcha. Okay, now, area community colleges offer free preparation classes, and GED provides a website that can help learners to prepare. And the seating for this last test is limited, so it's a first-come, first-served basis. You have to register in person at the office in advance of the test date. The last opportunity to take the current fall test is November 12th. The last testing date for retesters, if you passed parts and not all, would be December 13th. You have to provide proof of passing the Illinois and U.S. Constitution tests before you can register for the GED
God,
test.
our politicians ought to do that.
Well, there's
Judas Priest.
Yeah, and test takers must take the test whether on paper or computer. That's the change. For next year, it will all be computerized. And many people who take the GED test are over the age of 18 and not computer literate in some cases, like me. and that would be a big change. So if you want to get in on this one, you have to hustle up to the regional superintendent's office and register because of the limited space. So please make note of that on your calendar. It gives you a much better crack at a job, much better.
On behalf of those who need that information, thank you for imparting it to all. Now, we always try to we let Mrs. Busby kind of take the heavy load here, and part of that would be introducing the guests. So you have your
Well, yes,
special card in
I
front
know
of you?
who he is.
Yes, right. Well, I think you should have a proper introduction by the pretty lady.
Isn't he the nuts? That's what happens when you keep him up too late.
Yeah, we were up pretty late last night. Yeah.
Matt Nolte is with Creve Coeur Camera, and the camera world that I meet only through Bill and one of my daughters is really advancing, and people like Bill and Sense are just so into the camera business. They just love it and every new innovation, and we're glad, Nick, that you could, not Nick Nolte, Matt Nolte.
I've been called that before. That's all right.
I bet you have.
Ireland, little Irish boy there.
We're glad you
Nolte.
could be with us, because this will be fun for everybody who's not like me. I'm kind of the idiot camera sort, look in the hole and shoot.
Not every camera has that little viewfinder to where you can do that. So sometimes you have to hold it out 2 feet in front of you just and look at a screen now.
Well,
Yeah.
that plus the fact that film is becoming an issue. What's
Absolutely.
going to happen to the world of cameras that you used to put the little canister of film in?
Well, I'm told that we're probably about the only place around that you can still find a decent selection of film or a decent selection of cameras that still use them. They're certainly,
Interesting.
yeah, they're certainly fading away. The prices of film, the prices of film developing are going up. You don't see the 1 hour development that you used to. Certainly changing. The industry's going digital.
It sure is. Last night when we were down to welcome the honor flight, my kids were both taking pictures just as fast as their fingers would work. And Sense has a camera that looks more like Bill's, and Cass has her cell phone camera, which does a fine job.
Sure.
But you see, those cell phone cameras do everything but the dishes. But you got to know which buttons to push. That's not just a cakewalk either.
Right.
Well, what do you suggest for somebody who thinks, well, film's on the way out, the look through the little hole, punch a button is about on the way out? What do you suggest for people who are novices but like to take pictures of the grandkids, great-grandkids, and honor flight?
Well, I was just coming into the store. Come on into Creve Coeur Camera. We're on the southwest side of Springfield in the Parkway Point Shopping Plaza. And, we'll tell you the difference between what you can do with a real camera versus that of your cell phone. So there's a lot of differences on what a traditional digital camera can do versus the cell phones. I think if you're really the photo enthusiast, you'll be able to pick up on those differences real quickly. And you take pictures of grandkids, for example, you might want to be able to zoom in. A lot of cell phones don't give you that ability. You might want a better quality than what you can get on your cell phone, especially if you want to print your images. And so that's where a traditional camera certainly has big advantages.
Sense travels for her job, and she likes to stop and take a beautiful picture of something in nature, a bird, a deer, and so forth.
Sure.
Well, now with my camera, you'd have to point out to people that is a deer, not a sparrow. So there's definitely...
See the birds high in the sky.
Yeah, right. There's definitely a difference.
Absolutely. The typical cell phone might have, if you're lucky, a little bit of digital zoom on there, which doesn't give you a whole lot of magnification. There are relatively small cameras being manufactured today that can magnify or zoom in to something a factor of 50 times.
Wow.
Yes, so you can really bring something up close. So I have all these customers that go out west, they go to the national parks, they want to go take pictures of these animals that you probably don't want to get too close to for fear of being eaten or mauled.
What if you got any
So-
mind at all? You want to keep an arm's distance, yeah?
Right, exactly. So it's awfully nice being able to get a semi-compact camera with that kind of range and that kind of zoom.
Matt, I'd like to kind of establish where we are here. Who is Creve Coeur, and tell us a little bit about Creve Coeur, and while we're at that, we might allude to how you've been able to survive. Your Creve Coeur camera has been able to survive in the light of all this internet trading and purchasing and so forth.
Sure. Well, Creve Coeur camera has been around for a little while. It was founded in 1974 in Creve Coeur, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, it's grown to 10 stores, and we have an award-winning photo lab. The overall goal of the company is to encourage and teach people how to become better photographers and basically to preserve their memories. So Creve Coeur Camera not only sells cameras, but will teach you how to use them. We schedule classes, and you get one class for free with a camera purchase. The other thing that separates us is we have all the accessories that you really need to be successful as a photographer versus you going into an electronics store and they just don't have everything, all the accessories and such. So we have all those things.
And that's where you kind of make a little extra money, is selling those accessories. That's what it's all about. That's
Well,
kind
that
of
always
merchandising.
helps. Yeah. But to answer your question about, how did we survive, there's really a few factors about that. Number one is our commitment to customer service. We don't care if you bought your camera somewhere else and you want to come in and just learn how to use it. We'll help you out. That's the thing that we do the most, is just talk to customers about their photos. We look at customers' photos with them. We hear their stories, their memories and such, and, sometimes the customers in their minds might have failed in taking the pictures, and they want to know, hey, what can I do differently next time? And that's what we're here for, and we build up customers' trust, and they come back to us. We seem to have a loyal group of customers.
In the olden days, one of the big worries was when you'd take pictures face on of someone, they'd have big red eyes like they were a vampire or something.
Yeah, you got the red eyes.
And there were ways to get rid of that. Now,
Sure.
I'm sure that in today's camera world, there are other issues that you can overcome and teach people how to avoid.
Absolutely. But even that red eye phenomenon still exists, especially on the smaller cameras where the flash is so close to the lens of the camera. But software is widely available to make that red eye just disappear. Even in our store, you can come in and print your photos, and if you see that red eye just on the screen when you're picking out your photos, you can hit a button and it disappears. Pretty neat.
Well, pretty neat, yeah, but it's kind of like a miracle. How do it know what you want it to do when you hit the
magic.
button?
It's magic.
There's all sorts of technology into the software, and even in the cameras. Cameras have something called face recognition even. So the camera will know that you want to focus on the face as opposed to something else in the shot. So if you have that picture of your grandson playing out in the backyard and he's standing next to a tree, the camera knows to focus on your grandson's face, not the tree that he's standing next to. You'll literally see a little box track his face.
Really?
Yes.
And you say, how do it do that? It's
How
magic.
do it know?
And I don't know.
I tell you, these microchips are just the berries.
They're
aren't they?
amazing.
Well, it's just kind of like radios. As I said not too long ago, I got on that B-17 and I looked at all that radio equipment that we had in those days, and all that radio equipment is compressed into your cell phone today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had more power built into our cell phone than we had in all those big boxes.
Sure.
Now, tell us about this trend in digital photography. How that began to evolve. And by the way, folks, 648-5510. You might have some questions that are technical, and maybe you're not too sure. And don't listen. There are no stupid questions. So feel free to call Matt 648-5510. We'll try to answer any questions you have. But how did this begin? And it's just growing exponentially now. As
Oh,
far as
absolutely.
digital.
When I started back in 2004, the hot camera at the time was a 6-megapixel Canon Digital Rebel that sold for $1,000. It was the first what was then deemed affordable consumer digital single lens reflex camera.
Yeah, a quote affordable.
A quote affordable, yes. It had a tiny screen. It didn't have the ability to do video. It was slow. It had few special effects. And it was difficult to shoot any type of action photography unless you were in really good light, such as sunlight. Memory cards back then were expensive, so you'd spend $130 for a 1 gigabyte card. Back then, Facebook wasn't a big deal yet, so people weren't sharing their photos on the computer quite to the extent they do now. But today, 9 years later, the cameras are so much faster, they can autofocus so quickly, they can shoot pictures one right after the other at speeds such as 10 frames a second. They have better image quality, especially in low light. I have all of these parents of kids that want to take pictures of their kids in sports, and they have kids in volleyball and basketball, those indoor sports that are really hard to get good pictures. Well, by today's cameras, you can actually do that at much more affordable prices than what you could then. The cameras now have lower prices, they have bigger screens, so they're easier to see, and those memory cards are so much cheaper. Price has really fallen. And now, with social media, they can just share their photos instantly. Even the cameras might have built-in Wi-Fi. So everyone's got their smartphone with them anymore. So the camera can sync those photos right over to your smartphone and then up to Facebook.
Or put them right on your desktop computer or a
Sure.
laptop, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And then you can send them out anywhere. You can send it to Grandma Hogg out here in Beeson, Illinois, and send it from Bangladesh.
Now you just were talking about the affordable $1,000 camera of a
Quote
few years ago.
affordable.
Yes,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Depends on your viewpoint.
Now, if somebody wanted to get into photography,
Yes.
but they wanted to just kind of test the waters, you know, they didn't think that they were going to be Ansel Adams or somebody,
Okay.
you know.
She's a private
For
thing.
how much would it cost you to get a pretty basic camera that would do modern things, like take nice pictures?
Well, that camera that I told you about that in 2004 that sold for $1,000, the new version of that camera, the new Canon Digital Rebel, sells for less than $500 now. But also, Creve Coeur Camera has used cameras. I have the interchangeable lens cameras, or the SLRs, in our used selection starting at just over $200.
Well, it'll define that SLR, single lens reflex.
Well, basically, you have a camera that you're looking through the lens because of a system of mirrors. But traditionally, it's those cameras that have the interchangeable lenses. So you can add that long zoom lens, you can add that close-up lens, you can have kind of a do-it-all lens if you like. They're the cameras that you can grow with, as opposed to what I refer to as a point-and-shoot camera, perhaps a smaller camera that you can put in the pocket, and you can't add lenses or other attachments to.
No, but for starting out to test the waters, something like that might
Yeah, very
be
much so.
appropriate.
You'll
And-
get good pictures, basic good pictures.
Yes,
If you go to the basketball game or the football game or whatever, or watch your child by, then you're going to lose something there.
I suppose they're so much faster that you can catch the kid at the volleyball game, because by the time they get not very old, high school, my golly, Jim, that was a contact sport, wasn't it? My grandson and his son played high school soccer. What did I say, volleyball?
Well, she had a late night.
Well, they both had a round ball. So at any rate, man, that is a contact sport. They are moving
Yes.
fast. And would the less expensive camera be able to catch, would it be fast enough, the shutter be fast enough that it would catch the person in midair?
Yeah, the cameras have shutter speeds that are going to be fast enough. And with a little bit of instruction from us, we can really help you, fully utilize the camera, especially if you're just getting into photography, is new to this. So I hate to overpromise somebody and say, well, the automatic mode on the camera is going to do everything for you, because it'll probably be successful 75 to 80% of the time for you. But I always think of those indoor sports as sometimes more of the challenging shots to get, and that's where it really pays off to know your camera and come in and talk to the folks at Creve Coeur Camera, or maybe even take a class from us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're big on offering classes. some for a modest fee. For instance, I noticed just this morning before I came here to the station, I looked at my email, and I noted that Creve Coeur is having a ladies' night.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to address that? There might be some ladies out there who might be interested in that's coming up in early November the 7th. That's going to be down in Springfield, however.
That's going to be down in St. Louis.
I beg your
yes.
pardon. I just saw that Olive Boulevard, and I realized that that's out of our territory.
Well, that's okay. They can still check out the info for that. You got the email newsletter since you signed up for it, but you can go onto our website at www.cccamera.com, and you can click on the information about Ladies' Night. It's a great opportunity for ladies to get together and discuss photography and discuss, what you can do with your photos. So we do all of these interesting photo gifts. Not just simple greeting cards and calendars, but we can do canvas wraps. We can do household items with your photos. Even something that's real popular in my store is the glass cutting boards. You can do little ceramic trivets. You can do all sorts of interesting things with your photos. Photo books and, yes.
I was just going to say, who comes most often to the classes? Who's most interested in photography today, the men or the women?
It's pretty even. It's really pretty even. I might give a slight edge to the women.
I was intrigued when I was down there at one of your classes that there were more women than men, and some of those ladies, they were carrying some pretty sophisticated stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You could tell they were into it. Now, some of us, myself included primarily, are just only half smart with some of these things, and we're trying to hone up. But there are some good photographers anywhere, in any community. There's some people who really study it and are up on it, and we've got one right in our neighborhood. Jimmy Grimaldi is a matter of fact, he's shooting for professionally now. He decided that maybe he'd hang his law shingle, turn it sideways.
Get a respectable job.
There's one for you, Jimmy boy. But we have people like that who really study it and are into it. And then there's the rest of us that fall in another category that enjoy it but like to know more. And don't ask me at this age why I want to know more, but I want to know all I can before I get out of here.
Well, that's why you're you.
So if a guy was coming in off the street, and for instance, in my case, I'll use myself as an example.
Okay.
I had in the good old film days, I had a good Canon. I had several lenses and so forth. And I decided digital was here. So I gave my stuff to the college and bought a simple point and shoot. Went on a trip and found out that just wasn't adequate at all. So I went into Creve Coeur Camera, and I was kind of torn as to what to do. And it was suggested to me that I buy a Sony Nex 5, and it's worked out. And just kind of address the difference in the issues between this and, for instance, a Canon, whatever one of the better Canons are. So this is an entryway, a very modest priced entryway into a little more sophisticated photography.
Yeah, and I should probably back up and talk about the categories of cameras. Everyone's probably familiar with the smaller cameras that are referred to as the point and shoots. You have one, of course, and you might have seen the professional photographers with these large interchangeable lens cameras, and I referred to them earlier as SLRs. Well, there's this new category in cameras, and you happen to have bought one, Bill, and they're called the mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. So what the heck does that mean? Basically, it means that they have the ease of use of a small point and shoot camera. You hold them up out in front of you, look at the screen to shoot, but they give you the quality of those bigger and often more expensive single lens reflex cameras. And they're really built around the automatic modes. Even though you have the ability to learn more and more and more and to fully customize the exposure, to dial in shutter speed, aperture, sensitivity, etc., etc., they're just phenomenal for somebody that wants to be able to take really good quality pictures, and maybe they don't have the time to learn exposure to where some people do. Just a phenomenal category, and that's a really good growth area for us, is that kind of camera, because they're a lot easier to tote around than one of those big SLRs.
Well, there's a lot of nuances and fine points in just taking, well, just a simple snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot of interesting things just in this office.
Okay.
For me to sit here and point this camera at you, and I can do a lot of different, I can get a lot of different results by adjusting the focal point or
Sure.
the f-stops and so forth.
Right. You could blur the background, or you could keep the background sharp, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You could.
Yeah, but that blurring the background, that's that's a
That's
neat.
what you run around with all the time.
Yeah, it's my life. That's a neat concept
Yes.
because I don't know, it looks kind of ethereal somehow if you take a picture of a person or your dog or whatever you want to take a picture of, and then the background just it kind of melds.
Commercial.
Yeah, it blends away.
Yeah, I like that.
I just happen to think, speaking of cameras and so forth, this is a commercial world, and if we don't take a point and shoot at a commercial, we might not have a job next Wednesday. So goes right ahead, Mr. Ash. If you're ready, you've got a busy. Our producer's very busy with his camera and the mixing board. And we're right back live in the studios of WLCN. The program is Viewpoint. Our guest this morning is Matt Nolte, manager of Creve Coeur Camera in Springfield, one of the noted camera emporiums here in the central part of the country. Survivors, in spite of the online trend, one of the reasons that they're survivors, this comes from personal observation and experience, is that you buy a camera and you have questions, and if you buy a camera, you're going to have questions, as opposed to buying online, spending absolutely tremendous amounts of time getting no information at all. You can go to Creve or pick up the phone call, Creve Coeur, and they'll help you. I've done that. So that's one of the reasons I was talking. Matt was nice enough to drive up from Springfield today, and we appreciate his presence. Photography is, a lot of people have a lot of hobbies. Some people collect beer cans, and some people collect cigars and so forth. This is a little more productive, at least in my judgment. That's an opinion.
Depends on how you feel about beer cans, I guess.
So I thought it might be of interest to the picture takers around there in our listening area, and Lord knows there's lots of them. And some of them are very good. Some of us are not so hot, thank you, but we're working at it. So I just kind of, oh, by the way, speaking of instructions, let's talk just a minute about your instructions here in Springfield.
Yes. Yes. Well, first off, I wanted to let everyone know that if you buy a camera from us, you actually get a free digital basics class at the store, and we hold those once a month, typically on a Saturday. So one class is free if you bought a camera from us. And if you didn't buy a camera from us, that's okay. You can sign up for that class. It's on our website at cccamera.com, and they run $69 for the hour-and-a-half basics class. Our additional classes that we have coming up are actually 2 hours, that same low price of $69, and we have classes for those folks that may own a Sony SLR, a Nikon SLR, a Canon SLR, and we also have a couple of my favorites. Exposures 101, where in this 2-hour class we'll discuss the fundamentals of exposure, such as shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Those are the 3 features of your camera that what make the picture look the way it does. So we talked about how you could blur the background, or you could keep the background sharp, so to speak, if you wanted to freeze motion or if you wanted to show motion. So you can start telling your camera what you want it to do as opposed to hoping it does what you want. And then we have another class for portrait photography. So this is a class for anyone who has the desire to improve their efforts when taking portraits. And we'll talk about lenses and aperture, depth of field, what kind of equipment you might want, posing, and lighting techniques. So the class is geared for those that have a DSLR camera, but also if you have a point-and-shoot camera, many of those have portrait effects and such, and you can take advantage of that class as well. So the Exposures 101 and the Portrait Photography class are going to be held in Springfield on Saturday, November 16th at 11:30 and 2 p.m. respectively. And check out our website and get signed up for some classes.
Well, for Joe and Josephine Smith out there who don't know, you use the term depth of field. Define depth of field here for the person out there who maybe never even heard of that.
Sure. Basically, it has to do with how much of the photo is going to be in focus. So you could have a shallow depth of field or a small area in focus, or you could have a broad depth of field where you have a larger area in focus. So a portrait versus a landscape. A portrait is typically a shallow depth of field where a landscape is a broad depth of field. I want to get everything in a sharp focus on a landscape versus a portrait. I don't want that background to be too distracting, because if I'm taking pictures of my son, for example, I want to see his pretty blue eyes and not be distracted by, what's behind him.
Now, then, when you talk about ISO,
Uh-huh.
a lot of people don't know what ISO means, and so let's address that question.
Well, the easiest way to say what is ISO is it's the sensitivity to light, or another way to look at it is we used to buy film for cameras, and you used to buy different film speeds.
Right.
100 speed, 200 speed, 400 speed, etc. And the higher that number, whether it's the film speed or the ISO, the more sensitive your camera is to light. So what does that really mean? Well, perhaps when you're shooting indoors or in a gymnasium trying to freeze action, it could be kids playing basketball, what have you, you might select a higher number to make your camera more sensitive to light, because you want to get that faster shutter speed. You want to freeze that kid going up for the layup and such. But then somebody might ask, why don't you always just leave the film speed or the ISO up real high? The reason is the byproduct is you get a little bit of grain or a little bit of noise in your photos. So if I'm taking portraits, for example, where somebody's posing for me, I don't need to have that extra little bit of grain, or it's called noise in digital photography, on my photos, those little specks, so to speak. So I can get a sharper image if I have that lower sensitivity. But it's all connected, your sensitivity, or otherwise known as ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture.
Well, let's define f-stops and say, let's take that. Very basic. You have to have a basic understanding of that.
Okay.
But let's take that as Mrs. Smith comes in and she doesn't know a sick'em about anything. Tell her about f-stops and how she's going to use those to her advantage.
Well, f-stops or aperture, which is the same
Aperture.
thing, that's just simply a numerical rating on the size of the opening in which light comes through the lens. So an f-stop number of 2.8, for example, could represent a large opening for light to pass through, so it's going to give you a faster shutter speed than a smaller opening, which ironically has a larger f-stop number.
Yes.
So f-stops are rather confusing, and so that may not be the first thing I start to talk about, with customers. But basically, the f-stop is simply how big is the hole in the lens that light is coming through, and that's going to control two things: how fast my shutter speed is going to be because I'm getting more light or less light, and how much of the background is going to be in focus. So we talked about depth of field and such. Do I want to have a shallow depth of field or a broad depth of field?
Whether someone comes to your classes or just comes in to talk with you, can you give them printouts of what you're talking about with f-stops, for instance?
Oh, absolutely.
So that they can reference that when they go to take a picture, or they maybe would forget.
Well, yeah, we can certainly do that, but again, I would probably ask a few more questions of the customer to kind of get an idea for what their skill level is already. So as opposed to jumping right into the terms of exposure, which I think is really kind of terms for an intermediate level photographer, I might ask, what kind of photos are you taking? Are you taking portraits? Well, you have a portrait mode on your camera. Well, it automatically is going to set your aperture appropriately for taking portraits. Or it has a sports mode on it, and you can turn the mode dial to the sports mode to get those faster shutter speeds. And as your photography knowledge, evolves, and as it starts to make more sense, then we'll start talking more about the actual numbers. How fast a shutter speed do you need to freeze that kid going up for the layup and such. And even after you take some pictures, it starts to make more sense because your camera's going to save all that information for you anyway. So it's going to tell you what aperture was selected, what shutter speed, and then we can look at your photos together in the store, and let's say that kid going up for the layup was blurry. Well, I'm going to look at the shutter speed, and we'll look at that number, and we can tell that it was too slow. So Here's how you bump it up, and we'll show you the tricks in order to do that. That's one of the best ways to learn photography is don't delete those bad photos right away. Come on in and show them to us. The camera's going to not only show us the photo on that screen, but it's going to show us all those properties like ISO and shutter speed and aperture. And then we can explain it to you in a way that better makes sense.
Right.
This, of course, Jim, presupposes that you can read the information that's on your screen. Some of us have a little trouble with that.
We sell magnifying glasses too.
Oh, that'll help. Now, the holidays are
covered the
almost
bases.
here. You talk about portraiture. You know, maybe you only see Aunt Evelyn at Thanksgiving.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe you want to get your son a camera for Christmas.
Okay.
Now, do you have any specials coming up that people can take advantage of?
We're definitely going to have some specials coming up. I would especially look out for the advertising for the week prior to Thanksgiving. Now, of course, we'll have Black Friday deals as well right after Thanksgiving and up until Christmas. We'll have some great camera deals, and I'm not privy on all of the deals that we're going to have just yet, but definitely watch out, and there's going to be some good ones just like there are every year. But I do know that on some of the photo gifts that we offer, we are going to have some deals. We're going to do buy two, get one free on our photo calendars, which start at $15. We're going to do buy two, get one free on photo books, which start as low as $7, so long as you order those before December 1st. And we're doing an early bird sale on our greeting cards. So if you send out the family photos on a greeting card to folks, the sale prices are going to start at 29 cents for the 4x8s and 69 cents for the 5x7s. They come with the envelopes. If you do the 4x8 cards, the stamp's actually more expensive than the card itself. So.
Yeah.
There's
there's so many nuances in taking pictures. And you alluded earlier in the program to face detection.
Uh-huh.
Now, if Aunt Bessie comes in Thanksgiving and take her picture and they have using face detection, if she comes back, if we allow her to come back for Christmas, will that have that same? Will that pick up her face from Thanksgiving to Christmas in that interim time? She's been laying there in the camera all this time.
Yeah, when I say face detection, it doesn't necessarily know that it's Aunt Bessie versus Cousin Joe or such. It just recognizes the shape of a human face.
The shape of the face.
And so if a person is looking at the camera, it's just simply going to recognize, oh, I see the two eyes, the nose, and the mouth in the proportion that is typical and such. So it's going to send the autofocus box from wherever it was right around the person's face, and it'll lock the focus there.
And then we have smile detection.
Smile detection, yes. That's really useful for little kids, babies and such that don't smile on command. So you're just waiting for them to crack a smile. And so you hold the camera, look at them, and as soon as it happens, if your camera has that feature, it'll take the picture automatically for you.
No kidding.
Yes.
You don't have to stand there and say coochie coo.
Well, you still might have to say that because you got to get them to. You still
But
got to get
until
them
the
to
kid
smile
does
somehow.
it won't take the picture. But when the kid smiles, it's going to snap the picture,
Right.
period.
Holy Friday.
There are just so many. There's a lot of fun in this. And it's not, in the days of film, you used to take your box brownie and take all those pictures, run down to Alvy's drugstore, and 10 days later they'd come back and they had to go to border around them, and they were all black and white. With quantum leap since then. You don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy photography.
Not really. And, the point and shoots are getting to the point to where they're starting at $100 or less. SLRs are less than $500. Those cameras, similar to what you bought, Bill, that category of camera, the smaller interchangeable lens cameras, Nikon's got them starting for about $350. And we also carry used cameras as well. So there's a lot of ways to save money, and if the used cameras fit your budget, don't feel bad about that because you can get a tremendous value out of our used equipment department.
I assume that any of the used cameras have been reconditioned before you put them on the shelf.
Yeah, we're real particular on what we take in,
Right.
and we'll put a warranty behind it as well.
Oh, well,
So
see?
So you've got some protection there.
Right.
Well, it's like buying a good used car. If it's been well cared for and it's been refurbished and ready to hit the road again,
Absolutely.
you're good to go. Are there any last-minute tips that you could like to give, Matt, before we wrap it up here?
Well, as far as photography tips, there's one that I'll give. And the one thing that people always forget about when going out and taking pictures of people is they forget to utilize their flash properly. You might have an automatic flash mode on your camera that simply sees it's dark, so I'm going to fire the flash. But if it's light outside, it's not going to. And a lot of people don't think about the shadows on people's faces in the bright sun. You're standing outside, the sun's overhead, and you can't see anybody's eyes because of the shadows around that raccoon eye effect that I call it. You have the ability with any camera that has an onboard flash to force the flash to fire. And so next time you're taking pictures of your friends, your family, outside on a sunny day, think about turning your flash on. You might get a better result.
Well, on that tip, that's probably a pretty good basic tip, because you see time and time again outdoor pictures taken. You can't see the faces at all. You see the background.
Yep.
But that flash will fill out that face, and you'll be able to see that, and the background will then be blurred.
Kid might have a ball cap on, and the bill of the hat casts a shadow on his face. That's another good example.
Matt, we appreciate the time you've given us this morning, and the drive that you've made up from Springfield. Take it easy going back. We always try to close the program with some sort of quote that has to do with the subject matter, and I found one that said, "And other nice things about children is that they never carry snapshots of their parents." Thank you for Viewpoint.
It's been a pleasure.